because so many of us fell in love with Call Me By Your Name at MAMI.
It was screened here.
It was screened here in 2017. And I have such a clear memory of this, okay? So I was sitting next to Anurag Kashyap, and I had this tray, and there was some food, and by the end of it, I was just weeping into it. And poor Anurag gave me a few minutes because he was like, let her recover. And then he realized he couldn't actually leave till I got my stuff together and kind of got up. And he eventually just held my elbow and very gently picked up that tray of food and got me out of the theater. And so I cannot thank you enough for that experience.
Thank you.
Your films are just such a combination of really scavenging the human heart, really excavating our most complex emotions, our desires, our ideas about identity. And then you combine this with incredible visuals. Manola Dargis in the New York Times called you a cinematic sensualist. Do you like that?
First of all, thank you for your words. They're very, very reassuring. It's always difficult to see yourself from outside, and often, more than not, film critics have helped me, even with their possible negative critiques, understand what I do. So I can talk about this possibly because I now am at an age in which I can see retrospectively what I did, particularly through the help of people who can see your work and interpret it. It is true that for me the idea of self comes with the idea of the physical senses. And that at the same time, as a person, I've always been very interested in the act of looking, the gaze. So one can argue that the intertwinement between the act of looking and enjoyment through the gaze, let's say voyeurism, Bertolucci would say, and my profound interest in how people interact in the physical world make me somehow interested in sensuality and in the senses. Yes.
I want to get a little sense of your creative process. So you do so many things, right? There's of course the features, there's documentaries, there's ads. How do you decide this is what I will give my life to for the next year? You know, George Miller said somewhere that at any given time, he has many ideas in his head, and then it's a Darwinian survival of the fittest. Is that how it works for you?
I think that's super smart. I mean, George Miller is one of the great. I mean, I never heard that quote. It's fantastic. Yeah, I think there is something about that I completely relate to. When I was younger, I was more about on a mission of making the things that I was worshipping within myself for a long time. And then I realized that this effort was kind of fruitless, that every time you wanted to put in motion against the tide that was given at that moment, you were going to succumb. And in fact, once I started to relax and find other ways of control that weren't about the projects, but more about how you do the projects, I started to make more. I started to find more corners where to look at and to tell stories that were not always the same, but at the same time to be able to somehow reflect on things that I have dear in me. So I would say now I am in a place where I get the circumstances to choose me.
What do you mean?
Meaning that I don't want to resist anymore a process. You know, like I remember when I was doing I Am Love, I was prepping I Am Love, and that was one of those projects that I was banging my head against the wall in order to make it happen. And it took me like 6 years to make it happen, and many dead ends, many times in which we lost the money, we lost the actors, we lost this, we lost that, and I was like stubborn, and eventually we made it. And I was in Milano, which is not where I originally come from, but where I'm living now. And I was there when a friend of mine called me and said, we have this book that we are going to turn into a movie. Can you read it for us? Because it's American, but it's set in Italy, and maybe you can tell us where it's set, because it doesn't say precisely. That book was Andres Asiman's Call Me By Your Name. And so I read the book, and I understood that setup was Bordighera on the Ligurian, I think Levante coast, very Ponente, I don't remember one of the two, but anyway, on the border with France. And then a few months later, that version of the movie couldn't happen, and this producer started to ask me, would you do it, would you do it? And I said, no, I don't want to do it, I don't want to do it anymore. Because I didn't want to do another movie about rich people lounging on the sun. With a pool, again. And so I felt like, I don't want to be narrow there. So I was like, no, many times. I think I said the first no, like 8 months after the first call happened to me. So I was asked to be a producer. I said, sure, I can produce. And then, when all the roads were trying to make this movie happen and none of them was happening, and I was already prepping Suspiria, which is another of these projects that I wanted to make forever, I felt like, why not doing 2 movies in the same year like Fassbinder? And that's why I did it. And I was like, I do it quickly. Well, let's do this little movie quickly. And I couldn't really predict that that movie that I was resisting so much was going to become a movie that was going to have such an impact to people.